get a job with a big skull scar on your face?
No.
I see that you've got a gap here in your resume between 1934 and 1935. What were you doing? Oh, well, I was a minion for Dr. Apocalypse down in South America. I thought he was the legitimate ruler of the subterranean country of Rocktopia. Turns out that was all some bullshit, but I was captured by the Phantom and he punched me in the face and gave me a permanent scar. Oh,
Wow,
well,
rude.
we here at Tony's Delivery Pizza are thinking that maybe we don't need you for that right now.
Hey everybody, catching the last bit of Owen's story about the what was it? Phantasmo?
The Phantom.
The Phantom, the punching jerk face.
I mean, he's a classic pulp hero. It's just that when you take a look at a lot of the assumptions of superheroes, a lot of them don't stand up. And
right.
I think that can apply to anything that grew out of the pulp era of entertainment, including Tolkien, right? I mean, that's right in that same era of interesting stuff coming out, even if tonally it's very, very different. So I mean, I recently made a post on Twitter that said, hey, is your plot still accurate but have a different feeling if you describe the villains of your plot as the original native people of the area, right? Are you being attacked by goblins or are you being attacked by the original native people of the area? Because that very much changes, and even if they are goblins, that very much changes the feel of things. And if your plot line was, it turns out that Dr. Rust has created a series of Doombots or Destructobots, I guess Doombot is probably trademarked, that are attacking town, you can't replace that with local original population. That's not what you're doing, right? Those are constructed minions.
Right.
But it's a useful context, I think, to consider what do things look like from the other side. A good villain rarely thinks of himself as the villain, and I think it's worth asking. People wear Magneto was right t-shirts for a reason. So it's worth asking, are some of the tropes and motivations that we've been using for a century or more in adventure fiction and pulp fiction, which frequently get ported over to gaming, are all of those things that say what we think they say, and do they say different things to different groups because of different backgrounds and experiences?
Audio sounds great, says a Pook, which is great.
That's what a Pook says, yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, folks, it is ThursdAGE, and when we utter the term, the phrase, the word ThursdAGE, it can only happen on a Thursday, and it can only happen with Owen KC Stephens, who is the lead developer for Fantasy Age, and we come to you we've done this probably, what do you think, like 4,000 times?
I think you tend to lean a little high. I'd be surprised if it was more than 3,900.
Yeah, okay, that might be the case. So we come and we hang out, we talk about all things Fantasy Age, but we also every once in a while we'll throw in some other age related stuff. And Age is the adventure game engine by Green Ronin. Both Owen and I are, I would say, gainfully employed. Yeah, I feel gainful.
You know what? All right, here's a story. Back in the year 2000, I went from being a full-time freelancer to being a on-staff RPG writer for Wizards of the Coast. And so I had to move from Oklahoma, where I'd lived my entire life up to that point, and where I'm living again now, to the West Coast. And I was there for 14 months for various and sundry reasons. But when I was leaving, the expectation is that I'd be out there for at least 5 to 10 years and possibly the rest of my life, right? I was moving for my career. And my mother was so impressed that this weird little game that I had been playing since I was 11, that had been the focus of so much of my life, was providing me a full-time job with benefits and a retirement plan and some opportunities for travel. And she got me a card that said, "I'm so proud of my son. I did understand he's just got a new job and it sounds like a really promising career." And you open it up and it said, how much does a Pokemon master make anyway? Um, and that was especially funny because Wizards of the Coast at the time was publishing the Pokemon card game in English. But I really appreciated that, you're talking about gainfully employed. My close family and friends, even the ones that don't understand what a role-playing game is, and actually my mom does. She was my dungeon master for me and my friends for several years,
That's
because
right.
she discovered if you're the DM of 12 to 13-year-old boys, they shut up and listen to you. But even my grandparents, who never understood what this was, or for that matter, my mother-in-law, would say, "Are you still writing the same game? Haven't you written it already?" And I'd be like, "Well, all of these books in this bookcase are that game." And she's like, "That's not a game anymore." And I get it. It's a different paradigm, but they all appreciated that it was a professional, creative position.
Right.
So yes, I will defend to my dying breath the idea that if you are paying any bills with money that you make in a creative endeavor, that is gainful employment. Even if, especially in this day and age, you frequently don't, even if you're not just talking role-playing stuff, you frequently aren't paying all your bills with money from one source, right? I know lots of people who have one part-time job and a side gig and the thing that they do on Etsy, and they patch together a career.
Yeah, especially
Um,
creatives. I mean,
yeah,
the gig worker economy, shouldn't be overlooked either. There are a lot of people who,
agreed.
got a lot of things going on, and are also doing, not even maybe necessarily to make ends meet, but times are tough and people got dreams. They want to do some stuff. Hey, I want to say hello to Rain's here. Good to see Rain.
Hey, Rain.
Let us know that the audio was delightful. I'm presuming that means that everyone can hear me as well. I don't know why I can't trust. I just have. I've been hurt before. All right, great. Well, I trust Rain. I trust Apuk as well. So we talking about like slaying the beast of debt, the big boss of our lives. We're talking about boss fights, right? I mean, we're talking about like you know how to introduce boss fights, how to manage them, how to what's the what is your thought today on the topic of boss fights?
So I think that boss fights are one of the things that GMs tend to stress over at least as much as players. And one of the reasons that GMs tend to stress out over boss fights is that we are driven by our narrative experience to expect a boss fight to turn out a certain way, right? With the possible exception, okay, I don't want to go into deceptions because they're all recent, would be spoilers. For the most part, when you're watching an action adventure movie or reading a book or watching a television series or whatever, when you finally get to the big boss at the end, which is sometimes in RPG TTRPG theory speak, sometimes shortened to BBEG for big bad evil guy. Um, you expect that to be one of the toughest fights, for it to be engaging and important and interesting and fun. And that is putting a whole lot of weight on what is ultimately one encounter. And I think a lot of GMs want to do something different for the boss fight. They want the boss fight to have some element that has not been around uh, in previous encounters, just so they'll be able to say, this is the boss fight. This is you are finally facing Professor Rust and his clanker army. Will be defeated if you manage to knock the Rust-Oleum controller out of his hand, which turns out to be a can of spray paint. And I think it's important for GMs to both be aware that they may be putting too much on this, and that if the boss fight doesn't go as you planned, there are ways to recover from that. But also to think about the fact that there are both tricks you can use during that fight, but also before that fight, to set up your boss fight, your boss villain, your BBEG, to be a satisfying conclusion. And that a lot of that is on the players. If the players are not impressed and rolling their eyes and not engaging with the villain, there's nothing you can do to get them to engage, in my experience. And you can ask them, out of continuity. You can just talk to and say, hey, are you guys having a good time? Are you enjoying this? Is there some reason why this plot line or this villain isn't doing it for you? And that's actually one of the reasons why I think the most important thing about a boss fight is to introduce the concept of the boss one way or the other in advance.
Okay.
You don't necessarily have to do that by name, right? And sometimes it's by implication. To use a classic example, in Star Wars, the big bad evil guy is clearly Darth Vader. It's Darth Vader, despite the fact that Vader's boss, Tarkin, is in that movie, and we are told that Tarkin is holding Vader's leash, right? Tarkin is clearly a person who is in greater authority in that situation than Vader. But Vader is clearly the big bad evil guy. And we know this because only one of the protagonists ever sees Tarkin face to face. That's Leia. It's a limited interaction. No one is ever trying to defeat him and Leia is trying to trick him briefly, and even that doesn't work. Whereas Vader is showing up at the beginning when he blows his way into Leia's ship and he captures Leia, and he's the one that interrogates her. He's the one that fights Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's the one that everyone has a history with. He's the one that tries to kill Luke at the end, and he's the one that escapes.
Spoilers.
So yeah, well, that's why I'm going with Star Wars, right? If you have not seen the original Star Wars, I can't help you. Or rather, if you haven't seen the original Star Wars and you plan to and you don't want to hear spoilers, then I can't help you.
Hey, real quick, I just want to say real quickly, I want to say hey to Gary. I want to say hey to Chase as well. Two very dear friends of ours. Both of them streaming The Expanse right now, by the way.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Where? Yeah. Where are they streaming it? Can we put a link in that?
Yeah, we've got we've got Dice Priory. Chase is the GM for that group, and then Gary's with the what is it? 3 Guys in a Box. Gary, help me here. But Gary's just kicked off a new stream. It's relatively new, and Dice Priory, of course,
cool.
They've been streaming for what seems like forever. And both of them do fantastic work. But anyway, yeah. Hello, friends. Gary, remind me what your group is. I know it's not. And I know you're doing like Abzus or something, but I don't think it's 3 Dudes in a Box.
So
it's out of the box or something. Yeah. Go on, please.
Imagine for a moment if Darth Vader wasn't supposed to be the main villain of Star Wars. What if Tarkin was supposed to be the main villain? And I say that because that is a classic case of having introduced multiple characters, multiple villainous characters. And we know about Tarkin because we're told he's holding Vader's leash. We know about Vader because he actually shows up. We are also told there is a mysterious emperor, right? The emperor has dissolved the Senate, we're told. So if you are a GM and you have sort of a hierarchy of villains, you've got choices if things don't go the way you expected. So if you thought that Tarkin should, when someone says, we've analyzed their attack plan, there is a danger, and you were thinking, oh, well, he will then fly off and escape and they'll destroy the Death Star and he'll show up with a new death weapon in the next one. And then someone successfully pulls a society social interaction encounter trick and convinces him to stay and he's blown up. That doesn't have to mean that all your work is done, right? Because Tarkin has now been introduced, and you can say, okay, well, while Tarkin was killed, you guys didn't kill everyone who's in the Death Star, and there was this other interesting guy, Darth Vader. So we now introduce, all right, Darth Vader has taken over this position from Tarkin. There's also the Emperor, who is mentioned, but doesn't even show up in Star Wars, and he only shows up very briefly in Empire. So you can build up people by having a framework around them. And obviously a hierarchical framework is a great way to do that, but it's not the only choice, right? Like if you want your big villain to be, this is Dr. Ragnarok, and he represents the battle for the end of the world. And as soon as you introduce him, the players successfully turn him into a newt and lock him in a cage. And you're like, well, that was anticlimactic. But you've introduced that concept, that interesting concept, to the person who is the Archon, the agent for the battle that ends the world. So you just say, okay, you defeated that guy, but there is now a new Dr. Ragnarok, Professor Ragnarok, who is a new person has been selected because you all have overcome one incarnation of him, but you have not faced the power source. And this is just a way where if something turns out not to be the boss fight you wanted, you can ramp things up a step and say, yes, you defeated that. We're not taking anything away from that victory. The plans that the force behind Professor Ragnarok had were foiled, but that force is still out there and he is making a new villain. And you'll have to face that one. So whether it's by mentioning things like the Emperor super early on, right? If you have an adventure and people are attacked by bandits and you know that someday you're going to want a big bandit bad guy to be the BBEG, you can say, these bandits are all bearing the patch of the tyrant of bandits who's trying to build a anarchic empire of people that are trying to tear down trade in all other nations. Then by dropping that piece of information, yes, you've defeated these bandits, but there is this tyrant of bandits who's trying to destroy all of civilization because he believes anarchy is better for the species, perhaps. That gives you a lead in so that the players start to get engaged with this villain before they're crossing swords with them. So that's one thing. The other thing I think people should consider when you are working towards a big BBEG is, are there strengths and weaknesses? And if so, do we want the final encounter with the BBEG to play on those strengths and weaknesses? One of the most famous BBEGs is Sauron from Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
And we're told that Sauron cannot be defeated. Most of the heroes gathered together with a wizard who's also an angel and a dwarf prince and an elf and a huge army, and they march up to the gate as a distraction because Sauron can't be beaten. And actually, the confrontation with Sauron becomes, can you overcome the ring and throw it into the lake of lava? And that becomes a satisfying narrative cap, even though you never face Sauron. And, in the movies, he's a giant eye with no hands who, when you knock over his tower, is clearly going, oh, this is going to hurt. You tripped the Antichrist. But narratively, you had this big long journey and there was a conclusion to it. So I think it can be useful to think in narrative terms of your BBEG. What are the consequences? How are you going to defeat him? And if there are strengths and weaknesses, right? If you know that your BBEG is going to be a fire-breathing dragon, then one of the things you can do before they face that BBEG is, we've got to have some way to protect ourselves from fire. And then you can say, okay, well, you've heard that there's this halfling that makes fireproof cloaks, and they used to trade out of the seaport, but none of their stuff has come in a long time and no one's heard from them. And then the heroes can go to that port and find out what happened to the halfling that made fireproof cloaks, and they can save the halfling that made fireproof cloaks, and they can make an ally, and that ally can tell them, yes, I can make fireproof cloaks, but I need this particular kelp from the bottom of the ocean where there's spellcasting kraken. And so they go down, and this builds to that narrative satisfaction. And when you do that, it should work. One of the things that is very frustrating for a player when facing a BBEG is if there are things that they did in reasonable preparation that seem to narratively prepare you for that villain that are then negated, right? So you don't want to go to all that effort to get your fireproof cloaks, and you show up and the dragon says, oh yeah, I breathe fire, but my cold breath is actually worse. Because then they're like, well, then why did we even bother to get the cloaks? Now, you can do something like, say, the dragon say, sure, I can't hurt you with the fire, but I can melt the ground at your feet and slow you down. But that is obviously not as terrible as being set on fire. So think about the strengths and weaknesses of your villains and how people might overcome them and how you can build up to those things. I played a really fun game at one point where a GM had set up an indefeatable troll. That was literally the villain's name. It was an indefeatable troll. And the troll could not be killed. It just was covered. You cannot kill the troll. There's no way to kill it. So the players started setting about trying to figure out a way, well, can we petrify it? Can we turn it to stone and bury it? And then at least it's not a problem anymore. And that was a case where, again, like the fireproof clothes, because you then go on, and yes, at this point we're riffing on Clash of the Titans, but you're like, okay, well, if you go defeat a Medusa and you get the Medusa head, and then you can petrify the troll, you can't kill it, you can't defeat it, but you can temporarily suspend it in time. And then we were literally talking about, should we make a dungeon? Is that what's going on here? Should we build 20 levels of traps and dangers and put the troll in the middle of it so that no one can unpetrify it? So those are some of my tips and tricks, sort of on the larger scale, on the broad narrative scale of how to try and set up your satisfying boss fight in advance.
Okay, well, so I love it. Here's the thing. I know that you often wonder why people come to hang out and listen. And I'm gonna. It hurts me to say this aloud, to admit finally that it's not for me. They're coming. They're coming.
I'm
to
not
hang
convinced
out.
of that, Troy. You are amongst the best disembodied voices I work with.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. But you, my friend, are a wealth of fun, also very clear sort of guidelines to kind of get people through, a tabletop experience intact with adventures to speak of and fun memories, and hopefully not have it all devolve into an actual real world fist fight. Or something akin to like Monopoly on Thanksgiving. I'm wondering if you. I find that sometimes, as somebody, you really are dabbling in the world of of fantastic story, but you are a little bit of you're kind of a conservative. Like you don't like to. When I say conservative, I mean you don't like to push boundaries too far. You like to surprise and delight and all that kind of stuff. Talk to me about some of the fun, funny, tricky, or interesting things that you might have experienced or actually sort of baked into your experiences when people are playing with you.
I think you are in some ways right that especially when I'm giving advice, I like to sort of try and give what I consider to be best practices. Because I don't know that there's a right and wrong way to do most of this stuff. If you're all having fun, you're and no one's coming out of it psychologically scarred,
Right.
you're probably doing it right. But yeah, I think a twist at the end can be nice. So I remember a long time ago, I ran a game where there was a great big castle, and everyone knew that the great big castle had spirits and magic in it that would defend anyone of the royal blood. It couldn't harm the royal blood. That was the whole point. So part of the magical defense system of this noble family was that the noble blood was protected within their castle. So assassinations were difficult, and they could fall back and survive siege, etc. And I had a villain who was doing a loophole to literally have kidnapped a member of the royal family when they weren't in the castle, bled them, then covered themselves in that blood so they could come in and attack the royal family because they are now covered in the royal blood, so the castle's defenses won't affect them. And so that was specifically a way to get around a supposed stone of assumption of this game that people in that castle were safe. So that was already one level of surprise. Then during that fight, one of the heroes, who was a spellcaster, discovered that the villain themselves were resistant to most forms of magic. They had prepared so that they weren't being harmed by fire and they weren't being harmed by lightning and they couldn't be charmed. So that hero used the most minor level of spell in that game to clean the villain. Literally just a dry cleaning process, right? Get all of the dirt and filth on them, which the villain had not taken any protections against, homestead magic, so that they could be cleaned and fluffed and wormed and flavored. But that meant that they were no longer covered in blood; they were clean, and suddenly all the cast's defenses worked. When a player pulls something like that out of their hat, there is a reaction from some game masters, and it's a very reasonable, understandable one. I've done all this work, I've prepared it, I know how this is supposed to end. That trick can't work. And I think that's a mistake. I think if the player does that incredibly clever, unexpected thing, that is the delightful moment that everyone will talk about if it works. So you let it work. And if that means that your big write up for the villain is mostly not going to see use in that, then you just say, okay, well, you've defeated that villain, and now it turns out that villain was one of a set of 5 brothers that were trying to take over 5 other kingdoms, and since you overcame him once, the people in the next kingdom over who are having a problem with the same line of villains or a similar villain or whatever, call you for help. You're now a well-known hero. Please assist us with this issue. There's a great Barbara Hambly book called Dragon Slayer, in which our hero in the book is well known for being a dragon slayer. And what most people don't know is that when he killed the dragon, he did it, and he's a knight, but he did it in the most unknightly way possible. He had poison lances, and he ambushed it, and he was throwing rocks on it and wounding its wings, and just basically being the least heroic version of chivalry of that culture possible.
Right, but
because it was the only way he could figure out how to kill it. But the legend of him claims that, he rode up all St. George style and impaled it. And so people keep coming to him with problems that he doesn't necessarily know how to solve, because they're not things that you can poison and outsmart your way around.
But that's a lot like life, though, right? I mean, that doesn't necessarily...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, things are not necessarily as romantic or as, all guts and glory as, you may hear by the time the story reaches you. Here's Gary says, first Chase says that's really creative, flavored. Gary says, replying to, okay, let's see, the last boss, we just talked about Stan Lee. So the last boss fight Gary ran was in honor of Stan Lee. And he did a Mysterio-themed one-shot in D&D. Mayor Parker gave the party some wrist-mounted grappling hooks and his adventuring days to help. Okay, I like this. To help capture the villain. That's super fun. And then Gary says getting outsmarted as a GM is 3 of 5 of GMing. Losing to players is the other 2. And then prep is the full 5/5. Yeah, absolutely. It is, as a player, I will say, I don't ever, there's been a couple times where I have inadvertently, or I think I have clued in on the big reveal or the big surprise, and I've done it accidentally or purposefully, and then kind of brought things to a quick end, or have been in experiences where I, in doing something, opened up a venue to just kind of deal with the big boss that none of us were prepared for. As a player, or I mean, this is a question for folks that are watching as well as you, Owen, but have you ever had moments where you've unraveled the thing and kind of regretted it?
That can absolutely happen. When I had my gastric lap band surgery, I insisted on gaming as soon as I was home from that. And I was home from surgery, supposed to be on 20 out of 24-hour bed rest. I was on painkillers, and I insisted on gaming. And we were playing a 3.0 or 3.5 D&D game, and our GM put a lot of effort into a villain that was a beholder, big, nasty beholder. And I happened to be playing a paladin on a flying mount, who is a specialized expert with the lance. And I literally myself have no memory of this, thanks to the painkillers, but I am told that the reason that I remember people showing up and that I remember sleeping on the sofa and the game being over in like an hour is because my paladin charged the villain over all of the villain's defenses and resources, impaled him, smiting evil with the lance, doing triple damage and getting a critical hit and power attacking, and killed it in one shot. Because it was just so much damage that it just utterly blew through all of the by the book level appropriate defenses that the GM had put on this beholder. And I remember waking up and thinking, no, wait, people came over and it's only like 9 o'clock. Why aren't we still gaming? And my wife was like, no, you killed it. And so, yeah, I had some regret that I had one shot the villain at that point. That is actually one of the reasons why I tend to not want my BBEG to be standing alone, literally alone, at the end of the confrontation with him. That in a boss fight, it doesn't have to be that there's more than one person there, although it helps. But it can be very useful for there to be more than one thing going on. I remember running a fight where very specifically there was someone who was trying to summon the angel responsible for beginning the end of the world. So they were trying to summon, actually it was inevitable, but it was a piece of the machinery of the universe that would begin the apocalypse. And to defeat that villain, you had to defeat him in combat, but there were also a series of mechanisms that were counting down. And if you took too long to defeat him and you did not defeat the mechanisms, which were trapped and did damage and had various things that they were vulnerable to, you could defeat the villain and still lose because the apocalypse would begin, which meant that in addition to facing the villain, anyone who thought, well, that villain is not my specialty, but I am an expert uh, at mechanical engineering or trap disabling or arcane rituals, could go to other parts of the fight and interact with other things, even though in that case the villain was by himself. It can also be super useful for the villain to have a bodyguard. I mean, villains are frequently smart enough to know that people are going to try and come after them,
Right.
Or even
Body double.
an entire Imperial Guard, or they might build their own units, or famously, I had a game where it turned out that one of the BBEGs was wandering around with two flying invisible stone constructs that no one knew about.
BBEG is for
big
the
bad evil guy.
Yeah, big bad.
Yeah. So when and there had been some hints about this, like people had noted that even though he was normal size, he only went through these huge doorways, and that everything in his castle were these extra wide corridors, and that's because he had these two 15-foot tall stone constructs guarding him at all times, but they were invisible and they flew, so you couldn't see them, you couldn't hear them walking around. And then when the heroes jumped him, that was the twist. The surprise was that there were these two guards, and there had been hints that there was something protecting him, but no one knew what. I think having a twist at the end, you can have an environmental twist. You can look at the fights at end of movies. I've done fights with BEBEGs that happen in the middle of a stampede, which you can set up as a hazard. Having the fight on the poles that are over the lethal field of lava or spikes or chainsaws, whatever, depending on your genre, is another classic. The big round room with like archers around it that you have to either deal with or hide from. I really like in the movie Lady Hawk, there's, before the actual fight with the BBEG, Matthew Broderick has to pick a lock while guards are coming for him and while there are some shenanigans going on. And so that encounter opens with, we have to get our main hero into the room, and it's almost a foregone conclusion that once he's in there, he's going to win. So the real dramatic moment is, am I going to be able to get this door open in time for him to come in? If you want a memorable BBEG fight, I think it's worth looking at the players that you have at your disposal and their characters and saying, what do the players like to do? What are the characters good at? What do I think this character is going to be doing during this BBEG fight?
There's some
and then
great
if there's not an answer you like, add something.
I like it. There's a lot of great conversation in here. I want to say hey to Mark Kernow, who's over hanging out on the YouTubes, talking about an adventure that a classic troll under the bridge fight where the player just did not relent, that kept sticking to it and literally clinging to the troll and disarming it. Gary talks about, Gary wants to go to your goose and drop painkillers and crit bosses, but I don't think they've met your goose. Your goose that's nothing to be toyed with.
Well, my goose is Canadian, and any Canadian can tell you how dangerous a Canadian goose is.
That's right. Canadians very polite. Their goose, not so much. Their geese.
I made a Canadian chimera once that our friend Stan illustrated. That's a brown bear with one moose head and one Canadian goose head, and it drinks maple syrup.
Terrifying.
And
the blood of people who are visiting from America with painkillers. Let's see. Rain says, "Oh yeah." So Rain's, Chase, you bring up a good point. Big, bad, evil. They, them. Sure. That works for me. Let's see. I do like a good. I'm trying to remember. There's this adventure that I'd had D&D, where somehow all of us had gotten to be able to morph, whether it was by potion or by, God, I'll remember, but it was a heck of a lot of fun. Uh, let's see, morphing to a new form is the next boss I have planned. Fun. Dire Goose, Weregeese. Yeah, I mean, they're all of those things. Hey, Jonesy, good to see you. Yeah. I think the geese are just universally known as, really bad beasts. Yeah,
The
big
Canadian
bad
geese
evil
in
goober.
particular
Sure.
are yeah.
Yeah,
That's where all the hate and spite of the Canadian people go. It all leaks
they
into
transfer it over
goose.
to the geese and then send them on down to America to chase us around and bite us right in the butt. They do that.
Uh, so the other thing I think, and we talked about setup and trying to make sure that your players have something to do and having a few twists. Gary Avenger mentioned prep is a full 5 for 5 of being a GM. I think it's worth saying be prepared to run your villain. Whatever your boss fight is, be ready for it. So I have mentioned before that I tend to run with my laptop open with a number of tabs. So for example, if I know that my boss villain is going to be casting spells from specific arcanas of magic, I've got a PDF of the rules. I will open as a different tab on my computer each of the arcanas he may cast from, so those rules are right in front of me, and I'll read through them, the night before or an hour before, just so I remember what they are and what they can do. If you're the sort of person that can get overwhelmed with stunt choices, it is worth sitting down and saying, okay, here are the preferred stunts of this boss, and here's a 1-point stunt and a 2-point stunt and a 3-point stunt. You can even do sets of stunts, right? Because he may not have access to a 5-point or 6-point stunt, but you can say, okay, if he gets a 6-point stunt, his preference will be to do this combination of this 2-point stunt and this 4-point stunt that adds up to 6 points. If you want a villain to have some rarely used surprise up their sleeve, a great way to do that is with stunt points, so that you don't have to worry about when is the villain going to unleash this thing, right? Like if you can say a villain can do something once a day, then you as the GM have to decide, is this the best moment for that once a day? And you're running the rules and you're listening to what the players are doing. And if you've done what I often do and given the boss villain some guards, you may be running multiple characters, and it can be hard to keep track of that. On the other hand, if you say, okay, the boss villain has a ray of petrification, and they use that as a stunt, and you can even say, okay, if they have one stunt point, they will use the ray of petrification to petrify someone's boots, and it will slow them down. So that's not the full petrification ray, but that will come up more often. And then if they spend 4 points, they can petrify someone for a round, or they can slow them because they can feel their turn to stone. And then with 6 points, people have to save or they're fully petrified. And by having a power that, instead of saying this is one thing and it will happen for just these points, by having those tiers, you give yourself the option of anytime you have stunt points, they can do that. But it also gives you those moments that you frequently see in movies where someone has, a power to petrify or teleport or whatever, but it only partially works as the heroes are trying to resist it. And that kind of prep, knowing what am I doing with stunt points, what are the tactics I'm using, what are the rules that are going to come into play. If your boss villain is the whip queen, and you figure she's going to be swinging from gargoyle to gargoyle and tripping people and blinding them and snapping daggers out of their hands, look at the rules and see if you know how she's going to do that, or if you're going to have to write up custom rules, and whatever they are, be familiar with them. I think that is extremely helpful for keeping the flow of things going, because sometimes it's inevitable and people will understand it, but very little breaks the immersive narrative flow of an event like a GM saying, I have no idea how that works, let me look it up. And then you've got to, maybe 10-15 minutes as you try and go and find the rule and look it up.
So there's a lot of great questions here. Jones is talking about location, city-based adventures. We can dig into that, but I want to touch base on the idea of, Rain talks about using, those phased sort of spaces to add a narrative beat, where the villain reveals some information or there's a NPC that joins the party or something along those lines. I have a question for you, Owen. When you're creating these, when you're engaging your kind of pals around the table, and they're playing something of yours, do you tend to switch it up and sort of do things entirely different each time that you approach, sort of GMing, or do you have a certain methodology in kind of how you do stuff?
I try to have some principles that I stick to, so that players know what to expect from a game of mine. And if I'm doing something that falls well outside of those baselines, those principles, and I don't mean ethical principles, although I do try and have those too. I mean, I try to have an assumed set of things that's going on. I had a friend, for example, who ran a game that was very much inspired by and built off of Star Trek. And so one of the things that he wanted people to know for his game, for that game specifically, was if you are in good faith trying to make the best decision for the best people, you will not narratively be punished for that. So I'm not going to set up a situation, for example, he would say, where you are viciously attacked by small fanged monsters, and if you defend yourselves, it turns out they are the infant form of a creature that is simply a carnivore, and you just killed 20 babies. Because that's not the kind of game he wanted to run, right? That's sort of a gotcha moment. So I do try to have some baselines. I try, for example, most of my games I consider to have a PG-13 rating. I may well be touching on some grimmer and grittier themes, but we're not going to focus on any of that. And for the most part, this is supposed to be a fun adventure romp.
Right.
I'm not going to try. I have made players cry, and occasionally that has been an intentional moment of cathartic grief release. More often, it's because I've done something stupid and frustrating that was well outside of expectations, and they were just upset. I haven't done it often, but I have been gaming since I was 11. So in nearly 40 years, I have occasionally made a mistake and had people break down.
Not unusual to draw a card, to kind of have, I mean, talking
more
averages.
when I was younger than now. The other thing that I try to do is just be fair and even with my rulings, right? If I say in a game, okay, the villain makes a strength test and it's going to be TN 13 to push the giant cauldron of oil over on the players, and you all have to make a dexterity test or take damage, just as an example. And then later in the same area, a player wants to push those over. It shouldn't be harder for them just because they are heroes.
Right.
The exception to that is if this is, if you were to run a game in yet a third Death Star, and it turns out there were railings everywhere because the Emperor was killed by lack of railings. Villains can be smart, right? They can say, hey, those giant braziers of oil, maybe we should bolt those down. But then people should have a chance to notice that. You can say, you walk in, everyone make a perception test. Okay, you notice that there are giant bolts holding these down because you boiled 3 people alive last time. I also just my guiding principle, and the thing that nowadays, if I'm playing with a new group of people, I lay out front, is to say, we are all here to try and help all of us have fun. My principle is that GM and players alike are all responsible for trying to assist everyone have a good time here. And I do that because there are play styles that don't have that as a guiding principle. And if people enjoy those games, that's fine. But I need you to know as a player in my game that one of the things I'm asking for you, part of your social contract, is that you are not just responsible for your having a good time, but that we are here as, if not actors, friends, then in a friendly environment to try and help everyone have a good time. So don't go having a good time by making other people have less of a good time. That's not the play style I like to engage in. I also want to say, Stephen Jones talks about suggestions for cool locations in a city-based adventure. I think that could be a whole show. I think maybe next week we
Let's
will
do it
talk
next
about
week for sure. Yeah, yeah.
do city adventures next week. I think that's a good topic for its own show.
I love that. Hey, I also realize I'm learning new things every time we do this program, and the entire what 5,000 or 3,900 run of our program, I've been calling rain. It's Ren. It's Ren.
Well, we
So
will get that right from now on, Ren.
that's right. I'm gonna go back and do some VO work on the old ones. It'll be just like so. I'm looking at the chat and Ren. I'll just make sure to loop that in there. So, thank you for that course correction. I like the idea of I'm wondering, Owen. I mean, we've got all we have is time, right? I mean, you and I literally are two people who have very little time, given how busy we are and the things that we are cooking. Would you ever want to do a kind of a ThursdAGE actual play?
It is
Or
something
have
that I have
someone
thought
come in and do,
Yeah. It's the sort of thing I have certainly thought about.
Yeah.
My current position is sort of I don't want to add items to the giant overflowing bowl of things to get done until some of those are off my plate. And I presume people are aware that we're still working on development and editing and putting in of playtest feedback of the Fantasy Age core rulebook. Once we have a final set of text, which could still be a ways away, but once that is pencils down ready, I think that is a great time for us to either with me running or someone else running and me playing, or maybe just with me sitting in the background and making snarky comments, but whatever, show those rules off to people in that format, an actual play format, prior to them being able to buy them. I think that's an exciting and interesting way to let people engage with things while we still sort of control the flow of information. But that's the timing of what I'm looking at for something like that. Because right now, I can give general advice and I can frame it in a age format. The other thing that might maybe happen once the Age Creators Alliance is up and I manage to put out my first modern Age Creators Alliance product, which I plan to make a campaign setting, is I could see running that, because that allows me to double dip. I would both be advertising this thing I'm doing independently of Green Ronin, using those Green Ronin rules, and creating content for Thursday.
And the idea there too is just to be able to demonstrate how that process works, so people can kind of get a I like that. And a question for you then. Were we to schedule something, around when we're ready to schedule something, would you prefer to play, or would you want to run?
Before I answer that, I would like to ask our Thursdalians, our honeycombs, honey cakes.
Right. Ask
our honey cakes. Ask our honey buns. That was it.
Yeah.
Ask our fans if they would rather see me play or GM, right? Because the point of ThursdAGE is to interact with the community and find out what they want. So if no one bothers to give an opinion, I will then tell you. But I want to challenge people watching or listening now or later to reach out and let Troy know what you would rather see.
And here's the other thing as well. Would you, as the honey buns listening to this, conversation, would you be interested in running an actual play with Owen and myself and some other select folks? That's let us know, and you can send a note to letsplay at greenronin.com, an email address created for just this very occasion. Let's play. Let's talk about it. I'm very Jonesy volunteers as to run. I am unsurprised, absolutely. But so let us know what you think about that, and then you can certainly share in the chat as well, or later response if you're watching this on demand. But what would you rather see Owen do? Participate as a player? I would imagine that some folks who are deep in the, they're big fans of your work and you as a human, they might be a little nervous.
I can't imagine anyone be well. Okay, I can imagine it. There is no reason to be nervous running or playing a game with me in it, and the reason there is no reason to be nervous is I am of the opinion we should all be there to help everyone have fun. And besides which, if I'm streaming to the public, I'll be on my best behavior.
That's true.
Or if I'm not on my best behavior, I will intentionally be on bad behavior for the entertainment value, in which case it's not going to look badly on you. I will be pastiching myself. I'm one of the only people I know who has been paid professionally to be a rules lawyer. I way back when we were working on the epic level handbook for 3.0 for D&D back in 2000. I was added to the playtest team because people at the office had begun to realize I could find rules interactions that were perhaps had a greater impact than were intended when written, which is a polite way of saying I can be a power gamer. And so I'm happy to parody that about myself.
I love that. A quick question then for you.
Yeah.
When you are when you're playing, are you able to really get into it and relax? I mean, like, you know, for me, I want the experience for anybody who's kind of engaging with us on this level to feel like we're really playing. You know what I mean? And it's I'm not saying, you know, definitely ham it up, and I think that would be a memory, you know, for sure. But are you able to kind of step away and from that, like you eat, sleep, breathe, live, all of that?
Real talk.
Roleplay. Yeah.
If the camera's on or I am in public, like at a convention, I am never 100% relaxed. Yeah. That need not be a bad thing. This is part of my job. Even when I'm at a convention, even if I paid my way to a convention, right? That is part of my brand as a full-time freelancer who has, you know, part-time gainful employment gigs with Green Ronin and has my own company and freelance writes for other people. You do that. Yeah. The clogging stuff. My brand is me. So anytime people who are not in my inner circle of trust can see or hear me or will be able to see or hear what I say later, I have a personal editorial filter going. Right. And the tireder I am, the less effective the filter is, which is why people have heard stories from me at conventions at 3:00 in the morning that I would not have told at 3 in the afternoon, or maybe 3 the next day if I still haven't slept.
Right.
When I am with friends, right? I mean, like I've got a group of friends here in Oklahoma. One of the reasons we moved back to Oklahoma is there are people I've been playing with here for 30 years. Yeah. Multiple people that I have been playing with for 35 or more years. And yes, when we get together and I'm playing or GMing, I can get very, very relaxed. That's my main form of social interaction and my main form of entertainment and stress reduction. The primary fun thing I do in my life is play these games with friends.
That's right. Well, then that's also when your main form comes out, you drop the Owen costume comes off, and then people get to see you in your true form.
I told you before we started recording, never go full Owen. No, the human suit stays on pretty much much as possible.
So maybe, you know, who knows, friends? Maybe you'll end up seeing you know, a little sleepy Owen, and then, you know, full Owen comes out, and you know, it's a sight to behold. Let's just say at one point I had a body. Now I am disembodied, and it may have something to do with seeing a full Owen. It has turned me into vapor. You know what, my friend? We are nearing the end of another fine ThursdAGE. A great conversation, always a delight. Talk to me about, Ren also says I volunteer as tribute. That's exciting. I like that idea, and we'll kind of keep that stuff popping. And if you are thinking about it and you really do feel like you're particularly inspired and you want to, you know, create an opportunity for Owen to play and me to be there as well and play, and, you know, we'll add a couple other folks. Tell me what you'd want to do. Maybe we'll put together a stream and have some fun with that. And, you know, and I do appreciate, too, that everybody really gets the fact that, you know, this is fun, but for us also work. Also the work that we do. So it's a little more complicated than let's play. And also 4 hours, that's, you know, that's a lot. of time.
It really is.
Yeah, but what else do you have cooking? Do you have anything else you want to kind of shout out, or any exciting things to talk about?
So I just recently did another show, which was What the What, with my good friend and colleague Stan and I, the two of us on screen, and my wife LJ doing the disembodied voice thing. It's What the What episode 1, and you can
it's on the YouTubes. I'm gonna drop it in the I got a link to it. Comes up right away when you look up What the What.
Well, it comes up right away for you because you have been watching me. If other people do it, they may find like 9 other things called What the What.
That is true. There is video Samuel What the What in the butt. I don't believe that is your track.
No, I don't. I do very little in the butt video as I can. Because that's content I'm going to save for my OnlyFans.
That is true. That is true, and that is that you want to see. You want to see the true Owen, the final form.
Yeah, that costs extra.
That is
so that's a chat show with me and Stan. Stan and I together have like 50 years of RPG, R&D, and professional geek experience.
Yeah.
And this was actually inspired by last year at Gen Con. He and I did a virtual hangout. So that we could emulate hanging out with people at the bar after hours. And we didn't announce it. We didn't tell people what we were doing. And we got a bunch of people, many of whom we know, some of whom we didn't, hanging out and asking us questions. So that occurs on my Facebook channel.
When do you do that?
It's Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific time.
I'm in trouble. You always know it's fun when the boss comes in and says, Troy Bartholomew uses your full name. I've dropped a link to the what, and it's a delight. It's so much fun, and I adore both you and Stan. And I'm so glad to know that your beloved is disembodied like me. Always fun to run into. One of your peeps.
Or to not run into them, since you're both disembodied.
Well, we have a little dance that we do, a little sort of high-five handshakey thing. It's just sort of very misty and hard to see, but it's fun for us.
The Disembodied Voice Guild is not a terrible idea for a fantasy game.
Hey, I like that. It's creative. There's some fun. There can be some fun with that. I dig. LJ, always welcome, for sure. I do want to say we've got some stuff cooking.
Absolutely. Tell us about what Green Ronin has cooking. So they're paying the bills.
So much. But we are paying the bills, and one of the ways that we're paying the bills is we want to get the Blue Rose Adventures guide into 5e. We've got it ready to go. It's actually just needs to be sent on over to the printer. Just that easy. And there's some great add-ons. There's of course some stretch goals. I don't know if you heard this, Owen, but one of the stretch goals for this Kickstarter was a map of Aldea, and
cool,
a poster map, and
I love.
We got it. I really do too, and I love our maps, but I especially love Blue Rose art and the aesthetic. It's sort of. I want to say that it's dreamy. It's just sort of this. I'm a huge fan.
I have always referred to it as pastel fantasy. And
yes, okay,
I'm a real big fan of sort of the very calm, pleasant to look at aesthetic. I am sort of like looking just as good as anyone else. Yeah. I am just as happy as anyone else with there being fantasy that's all skulls and fire and fangs and blood dripping off swords. But there's got to be variety. And Blue Rose is one of my very favorite takes on a different aesthetic for how you present a world, which doesn't mean that there aren't skulls and fire and blood dripping off swords. That's just not what we put on the marquee.
Well, here's the thing, along with the very dreamy, very soothing, but also full of adventure and lots of fun. One of the add-ons, or add-ons is the Book of Fiends, and this thing it's something. It is amazing. It leaves sort of an aftertaste.
For those of you who know what this means, it is extremely Schwalbian.
Yes, it is. It is a delightful human being, that Schwab. But we've got right now where I think we're at. Let me double check here. I think we're at 17K. I think that our next big deal, stretch goal at 20K is Flight of the Snow Pearl, which is a Steve Kenson um, uh, adventure for Blue Rose, will get converted for
I,
5e.
I literally got publisher feedback about something Steve had written that I'm developing recently, and I won't say what publisher, what product, but it started with, "So this was written by Steve, so obviously it's good." And
Yes.
that is how I feel about all Steve Kenson products. This was written by Steve, so
Also,
obviously it's good.
all Steve Kenson interactions, honestly. I mean, you
Yeah,
just,
no,
it's just, yeah.
I'm
Pretty.
not kidding when I say that for a long time, Steve Kenson is who I want to be when I grow up. Um, I really, I think Steve's one of the best in the industry, and
Absolutely. And you know how
I'm
he
so
maintains
pleased to
it?
get.
He's like 500 years old.
Yeah.
He is a vampire.
So
Yeah.
I think that he bathes in the ink of immortal comic book characters. I think the ink that is used to print them
That's
is shipped to him, and he just right, because he
That's
wouldn't be a
it.
vampire. That would involve hurting people, and that's that. There are peoples that Steve might hurt, but not to sustain himself. Only if they deserved it.
Truth.
So
Yeah.
let me get out of my lane just briefly. I know that marketing is
Ah.
much more your thing than mine, but
Oh,
I'm gonna look
please.
directly at the camera, and I'm gonna tell people, look up the Blue Rose Kickstarter we've got going. I
Link in
know
chat.
that not everyone is in a position to back it. I know not everyone is in a position to spend money right now, but it would be a big help to us if you would share it with your friends on social media, find our posts, boost them. That costs you nothing but time. And it's been a rough year and a half for the game industry in general. We can use all the help we can get. We're doing our best
Absolutely.
to bring you high quality, uh, not money grab, direct. We think this is really what the market wants, what you want products, and that's tough right now. So we can use all the help we can get. I'm looking directly into your soul. Please, even if you can't buy it, I get that. If you can help spread the word, we would appreciate it to the bottom of our evil little hearts.
Wow. I work here and I pledge just came out of me. It just came out of me. Owen's taking us to church, but there's some really great stuff. We talked about uh, the Schwabian villainous Book of Fiends, but there's also
Yeah.
Death in Freeport. That's the 20th anniversary edition. Book of the
Yep.
Righteous, a little balance that out there for Heart and Queen, which is an anthology from Nisaba Press, Blue Rose short fiction. Shadow Tide, which is the first Blue Rose novel, and then Sovereigns of the Blue Rose, which is another anthology, a short story anthology from Nisaba Press. But good stuff, absolutely great stuff. You'd be supporting us tremendously. But I just also feel like Blue Rose as a title, as a product, it's good stuff. It's
It is.
really fantastically inclusive, beautiful, fun to play, a great bridge for a lot of different kinds of gamers that are either exploring tabletop or are dyed in the wool like I've been doing this since the 70s. It's a lot of
Well,
fun.
and if you're the sort of person that has been looking for a new kind of game experience, but you do not want to have to learn a new game system and you're already a 5e player, this is a great opportunity to pick up a very different kind of setup,
Yeah,
and enjoy getting to use the rules you're already familiar with in a new world with a new paradigm.
absolutely. Plus, psychic wolves.
Psychic cats is absolutely where it's at.
What about
That's
psychic badgers?
I I think I am a psychic badger,
Oh my
honestly.
god, I just looked I was looking at the screen and I'm like, wait a minute, I think we figured out Owen's true form. You will all pay for that, for that knowledge. But before you do, go pay for that Kickstarter. And I want to say thank you, Owen, so much. Always a delight every Thursday hanging out. Having a lot of fun and doing giving everybody the business here on ThursdAGE. I want to thank everybody who's been our little honey buns for watching. Let me know. Do you like honey buns as a nickname for the general? Do you prefer Thursdalians? Do you prefer? There was another one. It was Thurs. Thursday. I can't remember what it is, but I'll remember, and then I'll give you each a phone call at home about 2 o'clock in the morning to let you know. Links in chat for things like our Blue Rose Adventures guide Kickstarter. You will also get a link to Owen's program, What the What, and look that up and have some fun. Give them all the thumbs up, and then also head over to our YouTube. Give us a like and a subscribe. You'll find us. We're Green Ronin Publishing, and as a matter of fact, find us everywhere, like us everywhere, and say nice things about us. Everywhere. Right? I mean, I think that seems fair. This is the price you
clearly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
This is the price you pay for this kind of entertainment. Owen, thanks again, everybody. We will see you. We're going to be coming up on the next Mutants and Masterminds Monday, where we've got some stuff we're talking about. Starhaven. It's the summer of Starhaven, where actually the Patreon they're helping us write this thing. They're helping us put it together in a masterful sort of opportunity to really leave your mark on official Mutants and Masterminds canon. So tune in next Monday, 2 p.m. Pacific, and then of course we'll be back with ThursdAGE the following Thursday. Thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Bye folks.